Hello and welcome to another video. We're talking about the echoes of Eden. And if you've been following with us, we're in Genesis chapter 13 talking about Abraham. We talked last time about how Abraham went down into Egypt, how this mirrors the children of Israel going down into Egypt and then coming back up with great wealth. And then we come to Genesis 13, where Abraham now comes out of Egypt, and he is very rich in livestock and silver and gold. And there began to be a dispute about Abraham's cattle and Lot's cattle and all of this. And so they started fighting with one another. And Abraham says, look, there should be no dispute between us. Said, you go your way, I'll go mine. You can choose the right or the left, and I'll take whatever you don't want. And so in chapter 13, Genesis chapter 13, verse 10, it says, and Lot lifted his eyes and saw all the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, like the garden of the Lord. So again, if you've been following us, you know that every chapter has every story alludes back to the Garden of Eden. Every story has echoes of Eden in it. And so here we've got a reference to the Garden of the Lord. Lot looks at Sodom and Gomorrah. He sees it's well watered. You remember, he's got cattle at this time. And he sees it and he says it looks like the garden of the Lord. And so verse 11, it says, Lot chose for himself all the plain of Jordan, and Lot journeyed east. Anytime you see east, it's like every time the word east is mentioned in the book of Genesis, at least, it's like it is alluding to this echoes of Eden, because God planted a garden east in Eden. He drove Adam and Eve east out of Eden. So east is often referred to whenever we're looking at this parallel. So Abraham dwelt in Canaan, Lot dwelled in the cities in the plain as far as Sodom, right? And Abraham moved his tent and dwelt by the terebinth trees of Mamre, which are in Hebron, and he built an altar there to the Lord. Now the terebinth trees, it's Elon, and it could be translated as God trees, like God's trees. So it's a really unusual word, right? And so it's pointing us back to God's trees, the trees that God planted in the garden, the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So it's a very strange term, Elon tree, which means that it belongs to God, right? So God, appears to Abraham by the terebinth trees, and he basically tells him that he's going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. Abraham pleads with him, and all these things. But before God tells Abraham in Genesis 18, in verse 17, he says, shall I hide from Abraham what I am doing? Since Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. For I have known him in order that it may command his children and his household after him, that they keep the way of the Lord. This is going to be important later when we're looking back at Eden. They are going to keep the way of the Lord, the path of the Lord, to do righteousness and justice, that the Lord may bring to Abraham what he has spoken to him. So just keep that in mind, that this conversation before God destroys Sodom and Gomorrah is really important. So in Genesis 19 is where we have the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Now 2 angels come to Sodom in the evening. That's important. That's an echo of Eden again. 2 angels come to Sodom in the evening, walking in the garden in the evening, right? So Lot was sitting at the gate of Sodom. When Lot saw them, he rose up to meet them. He bowed his face to the ground. He basically takes them in. We'll skip on down. Right, so the men of Sodom see the angels go into Lot's house. They, from old to young, everybody in the city wants to, is banging on Lot's door, and they say that we want to know these men. They were homosexuals, right, and they wanted to basically rape those men. And so, very, very bad sin there. And so the angel, Lot's arguing with these people. He says, "Oh, you can take my daughters," and all this stuff. And the angels reach, in verse 10, it says, chapter 19, verse 10, it says, "The men reached out their hands and pulled Lot into the house and shut the door. And they struck the men who were at the doorway of the house with blindness so that they could not find the door." So then, they're talking with Lot and saying, "You need to get your family out of here," and all of these things. In verse 15, it says, "When the morning dawned, the angels urged Lot to hurry, saying, 'Arise, take your wives, your two daughters that are here, lest you be consumed in the punishment of the city.' And while he lingered, the men took hold of his hand, his wife's hand, the hands of his two daughters, the Lord being merciful to him, and they brought him out and sent him out of the city." So there's an expulsion. There's being driven out of a place, right? So they sent him out of the city. And so, Lot's arguing with them about going to Zohar, to the mountains and everything. And about down in verse 25, it says, "So he overthrew those cities with all the plains and what grew on the ground," right? He hailed fire and brimstone upon them. And he overthrew them, which means to turn over, and he destroyed not only the cities, but the land, whatever was growing on the ground. And so Lot escapes to the mountains, and that's the end of our story. So let's look at the parallels. So in Genesis 3, right, we have Adam reaching forth his hand to take of the tree. Eve reached forth her hand. She took of the tree. She gave to her husband. And God says, "Now man has become one of us." Genesis 3, verse 22, "to know good and evil. And now lest he reach out his hand and take also of the tree of life." So the same words are used there. And eat. So the word eat also means consumed, and God is consuming the place, the city of Sodom and Gomorrah. And so he says, one of the things that God is worried about is Adam consuming the tree of life. And so he sent him out of the garden, just like Lot was sent out of Sodom and Gomorrah. God sent Adam out of Eden to till the ground from whence he was taken. So he drove out the man, and he placed cherubim. In Hebrew, you've got plural, but you've also got dual, right? So you can know from the way that a word is conjugated whether or not it is a lot, if it's a group, or if it's two. And so the cherubim we know are two. There's two cherubim at the east of the garden. Again, every time you hear the word east in the book of Genesis, think Eden. So there are two cherubim at the east of the garden, and a flaming sword, right? So there's this fire, there's a flame burning in Eden, and it's turning every which way. So the word for overturned and turn are the same in Hebrew. In the Hebrew, it means the same thing. It means to turn, right? And so they guard the way of the tree of life. So here, the way of the tree of life, right? The path of the tree of life. So you've got two angels. You've got the reaching forth of the hand, and again the contrast with the blindness. The people of Sodom were blinded, right? And they could not get to the door, right? There was a hindrance of them entering in to where those angels were. There was a barrier between the men of Sodom. They were struck with blindness, right? So Adam and Eve, the Bible says that their eyes were opened, right? But nevertheless, they were still kept from the garden. There was a hindrance. They could not find the door either. They could not find the entrance back to the Garden of Eden. So there's a similar parallel there. The men of Sodom are struck blind. They cannot find the door where the two angels are where they're at. So it parallels And then there's the parallel of being sent. God sends Adam out of the garden, and the angels send Lot out of Sodom and Gomorrah. So then there's two cherubims at the east of the garden, and this flame, this flaming sword. If you'd have been standing far back at Eden, then you would have seen just this fire. You would have seen fire and these two angels, which is the same picture you get from Sodom and Gomorrah. And so the angels are guarding the way or the path of the tree of life. And what God says right before he destroys before he destroys Sodom and Gomorrah, what he says to Abraham is that Abraham will keep the path of the Lord to do righteousness and justice. Now, those are two things that are married together with the path of the Lord, right? You've got to have both. Righteousness, tzedakah in Hebrew, it really means charity. It means doing good deeds for others, loving your neighbor as yourself, doing what's right. And justice is more technical. Justice is more technical about, it's called mishpat. It's like the commandments. It's like this, and this. It's like, doing what's right, but, it's two aspects of doing what's right. One is about love and charity, and the other is about more a technical thing. So, and you got to combine both of them together. You got to have love, and you also got to have standards, right? And so this is the path to the tree of life. And I never noticed this, but there is a path to the tree of life mentioned there in Genesis chapter 3. It says that the flaming sword which turned every way to guard the path to the tree of life. So there is a path to the tree of life, and it is justice and righteousness. It's grace and law. It's love and standards. It's all of these things combined. That is the path to the tree of life. And so I appreciate you tuning into this broadcast. I hope that you got something out of this, and God bless you.